Good morning, everyone. Today we have our students, Mr. Nikhil Vamshi from CZBT, second year students. He is going to talk on carbohydrates today. I'm very happy. One of my students is sharing his knowledge. Over to Nikhil Vamshi now. Good luck, Nikhil.
Thank you, ma'am. So, good morning, everyone. Before directly going into the topic, I just want to ask a simple and basic question to everyone. So, as my screen is visible, one can see there, what is life? So, this statement is very cliche. You can ask me, like, how are we going to define it? Life is nothing but everything which is living has one life to it. So this is not as easy to define as it is possible. So we have several properties which define the object or the system as living. So many statements contribute to make the system as living and to have life. So I quote four of the major properties of life. So the first one being improbable. Improbable. So if we are going to understand what is living thing, we should understand what is improbable. Improbable is nothing but unexpected and apparently unauthenticated. So we don't know when the first form of life started on earth. So it is unexpected and one doesn't have any records or proofs of how the first form of life existed on earth. And the second one being metabolism. So we know our metabolism is complex and autocatalytic biochemistry. We have different forms of food intaken and we have breakdown of that food into energy. So we should understand how the metabolism happens, and if metabolism is happening, we say that system is living. And the third one being replication. So the system should have self-copying property with hereditary. So it should pass on information from one generation to the other generation. And the fourth one being data. So we should have one or the other system to store data. So we know millions and millions of years ago, the first form of life existed on earth. Maybe let us consider the primitive prokaryotic cells. So from that, life evolved, and now we are the advanced human beings, multicellular eukaryotic human beings. So how did this happen? So generations after generations, accumulation of information, storage of information, and evolution of information happened, which made this life cycle to progress and rejuvenate. So we have one of the experiment called the Muller's experiment, which shows how amino acids were formed from ammonia, water, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen. So the living matter is mainly composed of 6 elements, namely carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. We also have several other elements in our body like calcium, potassium, sodium, chlorine, magnesium, iron, copper, cobalt, zinc, molybdenum, and selenium. So we know life is composed of lifeless chemical molecules. So henceforth, biomolecules play an important role in living systems. Biomolecules such as proteins, carbohydrates, vitamins, lipids, and so on are responsible for any living system to sustain and survive. So we human beings and all the living systems are made up of biomolecules, which are lifeless chemical molecules. So we are evolved from biomolecules, and biochemistry is a branch of science which deals with the study of chemistry of living organisms. So particularly I will concentrate on carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, the essential biomolecule. So carbohydrates are referred to as the polyhydroxy derivatives of aldehydes or ketones, or the compounds which yield these on hydrolysis. So aldehydes are nothing but C double bond O, double bond O and H. Ketones are C double bond O. So carbohydrates are often referred to as sugars, and they are widely distributed in plants and animals. We see carbohydrates in the structure of plants, insects, and crustaceans as well. So they also occur as food reserves in plants and animals, like starch in plants and glycogen in animals, and they have various metabolic activities in our body. They are also referred to as hydrates of carbon because we have both carbon and hydrogen. So this is very basic structure and are represented with the general formula CnH2n n times. So where n is 3, 4, 5 or some other integers. So classification of carbohydrates, basically we have two types of carbohydrates called as sugars and non-sugars. Sugars are of two types, mainly monosaccharides and oligosaccharides. So monosaccharides has two categories, aldoses and ketoses. Oligosaccharides are nothing but which have 2 to 10 repeating monomeric units of carbohydrates. So we have disaccharides, trisaccharides, tetra, penta, etc. So non-sugars are majorly the polysaccharides. So we have two divisions of polysaccharides, namely homopolysaccharides and heteropolysaccharides. Homopolysaccharides are those which have similar structure. Example is starch and glycogen. Heteropolysaccharides have different structures and different types of atoms bonded together, like hyaluronic acid and chondroitin. So we have basic terminologies which we come through this chapter. So I'm going to brief them out. Sugars. Sugars are sweet to taste. They are soluble in water and are crystalline in nature. Example is our glucose. Non-sugars are those which are not sweet to taste, insoluble in water and non-crystalline in nature. Example, structural polysaccharides like starch and glycogen. Monosaccharides, these are the simplest form of sugars in carbohydrates which cannot be hydrolyzed, meaning which cannot be divided further into smaller units anymore. Example is our glucose. Oligosaccharides, these are the compound sugars that yield 2 to 10 molecules of same or different monosaccharides on hydrolysis. Example, sucrose. Polysaccharides, these are the compounds that yield more than 10 molecules of monosaccharides on hydrolysis. Example, starch. So today's session will confine ourselves to monosaccharides, the properties of monosaccharides and their chemical nature. So as I told you, monosaccharides are the simplest carbohydrates which cannot be hydrolyzed further. So monosaccharides are in turn called as the monomers or building blocks of carbohydrates. So they are sweet to taste and are crystalline in nature. So monosaccharides contain 3 to 9 carbon atoms in its structure. Classification is based on the functional group present. So we have two types of classes in monosaccharides, one being aldoses and the other being ketoses. Aldoses are those sugars which has an aldehydic functional group. Ketoses are those sugars which have ketonic functional group. So we can visibly see here, aldoses are those which have aldehydic. So CHO. So this is an aldehydic functional group. So any sugars which has an aldehydic functional group CHO is called as aldose, and any sugar which has the ketonic functional group C double bond O, and we don't have other hydrogen. So C double bond O is the ketonic functional group. So any sugar which has the ketonic functional group C double bond O is called as ketose. So classification based on carbon atoms. So we have different types of classification in monosaccharides. The first one being trioses. So the name itself suggests us trioses are not, tri means 3, oses are sugars, sugars. So sugars with 3 carbon atoms. So we can see here we have 1, 2 and 3. So sugars which has 3 carbon atoms in its structure are termed as trioses. Example is glycerose of aldehydic family and dihydroxyacetone of ketonic family. So one can see C double bond OH. So this is aldehydic group. So glyceraldehyde and aldotriose, and dihydroxyacetone, a ketonic triose. So next one is tetrose. So tetro means 4. So sugar with 4 carbon atoms. Examples are erythrose of aldehydic group and erythrulose of ketonic group. So we can see carbon 1, carbon 2, carbon 3 and carbon 4. So this is aldehydic erythrose and this is ketonic erythrulose. So pentoses, penta means 5. So sugars with 5 carbon atoms are termed as pentoses. Example, ribose of aldehydic form and ribulose of ketonic form. So we can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 carbon atoms. So we have an aldehydic group. So this is ribose and we have a ketonic group over here and this is ribulose. So this is the classification of monosaccharides and we have the last one, hexoses, sugars with 6 carbon atoms. Example is glucose and fructose. So we have 6 carbon atoms in glucose and glucose is an aldehydic form, and we have 6 carbon atoms in fructose and we have a ketonic form in fructose. So up next is isomerism in carbohydrates. So what is isomerism? So isomerism is nothing but compounds having same molecular formula but different in the structural arrangement of atoms. So those are termed as isomers and the process is referred to as isomerism. So the other way to define isomerism in carbohydrates is aldoses and ketoses containing same number of carbon atoms. So if we count the carbon atoms and the whole atoms like hydrogen and oxygen present in glucose and fructose, it is same. We have C6, H12 and O6. So we have 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms and 6 oxygen atoms in both glucose and fructose. But they have these two are the isomeric forms of each other. Why? Because we have the structures of glucose and fructose completely different. So the first carbon is aldehydic of glucose and the first carbon is primary alcohol in fructose. The second carbon has alcoholic and the hydrogen group in second carbon of glucose, but we have the ketonic functional group. So the functional groups differ, but the molecular formula is same. So the structure differs. So we have 2 types of isomers over here. So next we have a concept called chirality or chiral carbon. So carbon which is bonded to 4 different atoms or groups is referred to as chiral carbon, and chiral carbon is also referred to as asymmetric carbon. Asymmetric because it is attached to 4 different groups or atoms. So we have 6 carbons and we have 4 chirality centers. The second carbon, third carbon, fourth carbon and fifth carbon are the chiral carbons of glucose molecule. So we can see here the second carbon is bonded to 4 different groups or atoms. We have the hydrogen, we have the hydroxyl group, we have the aldehydic group, and the whole rest of this becomes other groups. So we have 4 different groups attached to second carbon. The same thing happens with third carbon, fourth carbon and fifth carbon. So we have 4 chiral centers or 4 chiral carbons in a glucose molecule. Next we have something called as D and L isomers. So as I told you, we have 4 chiral carbons. Carbon 2, carbon 3, carbon 4 and carbon 5 are the chiral carbons, and the 5th carbon of glucose is termed as the highest chirality center. So the 5th carbon has the highest chirality center because it is attached to 4 different and bulky groups. So what happens if the hydroxyl group or the OH group is present to the right of the 5th chirality carbon of glucose? We call that sort of glucose as D-glucose, and we should write it in capital form. Don't make a confusion here. So if the carbon, if chirality carbon has the hydroxyl group towards its right side, we call it as D-glucose. If the hydroxyl group is bonded towards the left of the 5th chirality carbon, we call it as L-glucose. I hope this thing is clear. So don't make confusion over here. And next we have optical isomerism. So what is optical isomerism? compounds having same molecular formula but differ in the rotation of plane polarized light either to right or left or optical activity are termed as optical isomers and the phenomenon as optical isomerism. And the main criteria to identify if the molecule is optically active or not is the presence of asymmetric carbon or chiral carbon. So the presence of asymmetric carbon also confers the compound is optically active. So this is unpolarized light. Unpolarized light is nothing but the light which has vibrations in all directions. So one can see here the light which has vibrations in all directions is termed as unpolarized light. So when this unpolarized light is passed through a Polaroid, so this is a Polaroid, those vibrations are confined to a single direction. So now when an unpolarized light is passed through a Polaroid, we get a plane polarized light which has its vibrations confined to a single direction. So now we here have its vibrations confined to vertical direction. So this is plane polarized light. So now here we have a polarizer. So when unpolarized light is passed through a polarizer, we get polarized light. So now this polarized light is passed through a substance. So let us consider we have glucose in this polarimeter. So now and we have an analyzer over here. So when this light passes through this substance, if this light passes without changing its direction, we call this substance as optically inactive. So now if this polarized light changes its directions, let us consider if this substance rotates this light into the left side, we call it as levorotatory or minus form of the substance. So if this polarized light rotates the optical activity of the substance to the right side, we call it as dextrorotatory. So we have two forms, that is dextrorotatory, small d form or plus form, and levorotatory, small l form or minus form. So don't have a confusion between D and L form, capital D, capital L form of isomers with these small d, small l form of isomers. In chemistry, we majorly call dextro like towards right and levo is towards left. So don't make a confusion over here. Small d and small l forms indicate the optically active and capital D, capital L form indicates the isomers. So next we have a concept called racemic mixture. What is racemic mixture? If D and L forms, that is dextro and levo forms of isomers are present in equal concentration, it is known as racemic mixture or D and L mixture. So racemic mixture is optically inactive since the dextro and levorotatory activities cancel each other, and this process of converting an optically active compound into an optically inactive compound is termed as racemization. So now if we have, let us consider glucose itself. So if we have a glucose having 50% of dextrorotatory molecules and 50% of levorotatory molecules, we call that mixture as racemic mixture. And racemic mixture is always optically inactive because the left optical activity is cancelled by the right optical activity. So next we'll have the structure of glucose. So configuration of sugars. Emil Fischer elucidated the configuration of almost all possible stereoisomers of sugars including D-glucose. They are termed as Fischer projections. So this is the structure formulated by Emil Fischer, and this is called as the linear structure. So the molecular formula is C6H12O6. So this is called as Emil Fischer structure or the linear structure of glucose. But we had many disadvantages. So Fischer structure fails to explain certain properties of glucose, and hence another method was searched for. So we know we have 6 carbons in the glucose molecule, and those are tetrahedral carbon atoms. So they tend to bend the glucose molecule, forming a ring. The ring formation in glucose molecule may be visualized as the aldehyde forms hemiacetals when reacted with alcohols. Therefore, if we have aldehydic functional group and they react with the primary alcohols, we get hemiacetals. If we have ketonic functional group and if they react with primary alcohols, we have hemiketones. The 5-membered ring is referred to as furanose and the 6-membered ring is referred to as pyranose. So this is furanose structure and this is pyranose structure. So we have the mechanism or the process over here. So this is the aldehydic functional group and this is primary alcohol. So what happens is the alcohol present in the 5th carbon OH hydroxyl group makes a bond with the carbon of the aldehydic group. So we can see here the alcohol bonds with carbon and results in the formation of hemiacetals. Same happens with ketone. So the alcohol bonds with ketone in the formation of hemiketal. So this is the OH group or the alcoholic group which is bonding to the carbon over here. So we have the formation of hemiacetal which results in the cyclization forming the ring structure of glucose. So we have some chemistry involved between in the 6 carbons. So we'll see what it is. The carbon 1 is called as anomeric carbon. So what is anomeric carbon? The functional group, the carbon to which the functional group is attached is called as anomeric carbon. And the 2nd and 4th carbons are called as epimers. We will discuss in detail about what are epimers. The 5th carbon is called the highest chiral carbon and the 6th carbon is a carbon which has primary alcohol group attached to it. So we have 6 carbons which have 6 different roles to play. So the first one is called as anomeric carbon because it is attached to the functional group, the aldehydic group. The 2nd and 4th carbon are called as epimers. The 3rd carbon is stable. There is no possible change in the structure even if it has epimers. So the 3rd carbon is stable. So there is no change of H to this side and OH to this side. This is stable structure. The 5th carbon is the highest chiral carbon and the 6th carbon is the carbon which has primary alcohol group attached to it. So what are anomers? So as I told you, the 5th carbon is the highest chiral carbon in glucose or any of the sugars for that matter. So what happens is we have OH here. So the carbon gives out OH and the hydroxyl group bonds with the first anomeric carbon. We have aldehydic group over here. So what happens is the OH here bonds with the first carbon atom. So now if we have OH to our right and H to our left, so if the hydroxyl group is attached to the right side of the anomeric carbon, we call that form of structure as alpha structure. So this is the alpha D-glucose. And if the hydroxyl group is present towards the left of the anomeric carbon, we call it as beta structure. So this is the structure of beta D-glucose. So if the hydroxyl group is present towards right, it is called as alpha D-glucose. If the hydroxyl group is present towards left, it is called as beta D-glucose. So what are epimers? As I told you, 2nd carbon and 4th carbon are the epimeric carbons. So we have the structure of glucose in the center. So if you properly check and visualize the structure of the 2nd carbon, we have the hydroxyl group towards right and the hydrogen bonded towards left. Let us see the structure towards our left. So we have the change in atoms, spatial arrangement. So we have the hydrogen towards our right and hydroxyl towards our left. So there is change of atoms or change in the position of atoms in the second carbon. So this is called as D-mannose, and D is the epimer of glucose. So if the hydroxyl is present towards the left, it is D-mannose. And same thing happens with the fourth carbon. We have hydroxyl group towards right in glucose and hydrogen towards left. But this is completely interconverted. We have hydroxyl group towards our left and hydrogen towards our right. So this form of glucose is called as D-galactose. So the names are completely different. So this is an epimer at fourth carbon and this is an epimer at second carbon. So the two epimeric structures of glucose are D-mannose and D-galactose. Next, we have something called as specific rotation. So what is specific rotation? Number of degrees of rotation observed when plain polarized light is passed through 1 liter of solution having a concentration of 1 gram per milliliter is known as specific rotation. And this specific rotation is used to measure the optical activity of a compound. So what actually is specific rotation, we'll understand now. So as I told you, this is unpolarized light. When passed through a polarizer, we get plain polarized light. So we have a substance here. So let us consider glucose. So when this polarized light is passed through glucose, we have some angle of rotation or some angle of optical activity which is being happening. So what happens if the normal optical activity of glucose is, let us consider 60 degree. So if it is 60 degree, it is rotating towards, it is called as dextro. And if the angle changes from 60 to, let us consider 110 or 100, so we have change in the angle. So this change from 60 degree to 110 degree is called as specific rotation of that substance. And specific rotation is always linked towards mutarotation. So what actually is mutarotation, we'll understand. So let us consider a situation here. So let us take pure form of alpha D glucose. So alpha D glucose is nothing but glucose which has the hydroxyl group towards right. So that glucose is called as alpha D glucose. So now if we dissolve alpha D glucose in water, what happens, and let us allow it to settle down, it rapidly or it slowly converts into beta D glucose. And if we take pure solution of beta D glucose and allow it to settle, it slowly converts into alpha D glucose. So what happens? There is change in specific rotation. The alpha D glucose form has a specific rotation of, let us consider 50 degree, and the beta D glucose has a specific rotation of about 18 degree. So what happens? The alpha D glucose changes into beta D glucose and the beta D glucose changes into alpha D glucose. So there is change in specific rotation and they attain equilibrium. So if we consider 100% mixture, we have 36% of alpha D glucose and 64% of beta D glucose. So what is happening? The alpha D glucose is slowly converting into beta D glucose and the beta D glucose is slowly converting into alpha D glucose. So there is an equilibrium which is attained. So what happens? The specific rotation from 50 degree increases to 57 degree and specific rotation from 18 degree increases to 57 degree. So the substance has a specific rotation of about 57 degree. So this is called as mutarotation. Mutarotation is nothing but the change in specific rotation of a substance with respect to time. So if we allow a glucose substance to settle, its specific rotation increases or decreases with time. So this form of phenomenon is called as mutarotation. So we have some properties of monosaccharides discussed over here. So formation of glucoside, ester or reaction with acetic anhydride, reaction with hydroxylamine, phenyl hydrazine and hydrogen cyanide, oxidation reaction, reaction with Tollens reagent, reaction with bromine water. So formation of glucoside. So when glucose or alpha D glucose reacts with methanol or alcohol in the presence of hydrochloric acid as a catalyst, it forms methyl D glucoside. So the hydrogen over here is replaced by the methyl group and results in the formation of water as well. So when alpha D glucose reacts with methyl alcohol in presence of HCl, it forms alpha D methyl glucoside. Why it is called as glucoside? Because the glucose, the oxygen of the glucose is bonded with some other atom or group. So these form of molecules or substances are termed as glucosides or glycosides. Next, reaction with acetic anhydride. Acetic anhydride is nothing but acetic acid which doesn't has water. So we have CH3COO. So this is called as acetic anhydride. So when monosaccharides react with acetic anhydride, they form esters which indicate the presence of alcoholic groups in the molecule, and glucose upon acetylation yields pentaacetate derivative. So this is alpha D glucose. When it reacts with acetic anhydride, we have pentaacetyl derivative and there is formation of esters. So COC, this bond is called as ester bond. So we have the formation of esters over here. So all the hydrogen is replaced by methyl groups. The acetic groups CH3CO. So we have the formation of pentaacetyl derivative and also acetic acid. So reaction with hydroxylamine, phenyl hydrazine and hydrogen cyanide. So glucose forms an oxime with hydroxylamine, phenyl hydrazone with hydrazine and glucose cyanohydrin with hydrogen cyanide. So all these reactions indicate the presence of COOH group in glucose. So now when D-glucose reacts with phenyl hydroxylamine, it results in the formation of oxime. So this is glucooxime. What happens? The NOH or the oxygen over here is converted into oxime group. So this results in the formation of glucooxime. So next we have phenyl hydrazine converted into phenyl hydrazone. So this is phenyl hydrazine. So when glucose reacts with phenyl hydrazine, we have the formation of phenyl glucose phenyl hydrazone. So we have the complete reaction over here. So when glucose reacts with phenyl hydrazine, we have glucose phenyl hydrazone. When it reacts with one other molecule of phenyl hydrazine, we have the formation of C double bond O, that is a ketonic group, and when it reacts with third mole of phenyl hydrazine, we have the formation of glucazones or ozones. So when glucose reacts with 3 moles of phenyl hydrazine, we have the formation of D-glucazone. Reaction of glucose with hydrogen cyanide. So when glucose reacts with hydrogen cyanide, we have the formation of glucose cyanohydrin. So HCN is nothing but hydroxyhydrin bond. So when what happens is this the double bond is broken and we have the formation of OH here, and the electrons transfer towards the hydrogen and the CN bonds over to the hydrogen, resulting in the formation of glucose cyanohydrin. So next we have oxidation reaction. So oxidation is nothing but addition of oxygen or removal of hydrogen from a compound. So mild oxidation, when monosaccharides having aldehydic functional group react with mild oxidizing agents like hydrogen bromide, they produce acid derivatives of glucose or monocarboxylic acids. So this is the aldehydic group. Mild oxidizing agent is hydrogen bromide majorly. So when hydrogen bromide oxidizes glucose, we have the formation of gluconic acid. The aldehyde group is converting into the carboxylic group, and this is termed as mild oxidation. Strong oxidation. Here what happens, both aldehyde group and the primary alcohol is converted into carboxylic acid. So strong oxidizing agent like nitric acid converts both aldehyde group and the primary alcoholic group into dicarboxylic acids. So D-glucose is converted into D-glucaric acid on strong oxidizing agent like nitric acid. Next, we have reaction with silver oxide or Tollens reagent. So glucose reacts with Tollens reagent, silver oxide, to give a silver mirror. So what happens is the Tollens reagent is nothing but ammonical silver nitrate. So that ammonical silver nitrate, when reacts with glucose, it liberates silver molecules or silver ions. So now, if we consider this as glucose, and if we add Tollens reagent to this, after some time we have the formation of silver mirror around the test tube, which indicates the liberation of silver and which also indicates that glucose reacts with Tollens reagent to give a silver mirror. So next we have reaction with bromine water. Glucose reacts with bromine water and oxidize into gluconic acid. So here, this is same as oxidation with mild oxidizing agents. So when glucose reacts with bromine water, we have the aldehyde group getting converted into carboxylic groups. CHO is converted into COOH. Next, we have sugar acids. So aldoses on oxidation results in the formation of 3 different types of sugar acids, which have their own biological importance as well. So based on the condition of oxidation, they are as follows. We have aldonic acid, alduronic acid, and aldaric acid. What's aldonic acid? So when glucose undergoes mild oxidation, and if we replace only the aldehyde group, so such type of acids are called as aldonic acids. On mild oxidation, the aldehyde group of glucose molecule is oxidized to monocarboxylic acid, which results in the formation of aldonic acid. So what is aldonic acid? The acid in which the aldehyde group is converted into carboxylic group. So these acids are called as aldonic acids. Example is our gluconic acid. Next is alduronic acid. So these are the sugar acids in which the primary alcohol of the glucose molecule oxidized to carboxylic group in the presence of an enzyme, resulting in the formation of alduronic acid. So here the aldehyde group remains the same, but the primary alcoholic group, which is attached to the 6th carbon, is converted into the carboxylic group, that is COOH. So these type of acids are called as alduronic acids. Example is our glucuronic acid. So next is aldaric acid. So here we have the oxidation of both aldehyde group and the primary alcohol group. So such type of acids are called as aldaric acids. Example is glucaric acid. So we use strong oxidizing agents to convert both aldehyde group and the ketonic group into aldaric acids. So this is the depiction of how we form gluconic, aldonic, aldaric and alduronic acids. So if only the aldehyde group is converted into carboxylic group, we call them as aldonic acids. If the carboxylic group and both primary alcohol groups are converted into COOH groups, we call them as aldaric acids. If only the primary carbon or the primary alcoholic group is converted into carboxylic acids, we call them as alduronic acids. So this completes my seminar, and I hope everyone got through what I told. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nikhil Vamshi, for such a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
And we'll go any other day for the discussion session, okay? Right now, we are not going for any kind of discussion session. We'll keep separately for that only, okay?
And I have had confusions because this was PPT and this should be done, this should not be done visually, and it takes time to understand. So if ma'am permits, after the college reopens, we'll have one board session as well.
Yeah, definitely, Nikhil Vamshi, we can do that one. Okay, I'm very happy and proud today. Nikhil Vamshi presented his seminar talk on carbohydrates. Thank you, Mr. Nikhil Vamshi, again for your valuable time.
Thank you, ma'am.
You got your 5 Intel assignment marks. Okay.
Yes,
I thank all the 95 students for investing your valuable time on Sunday for this special class. I, Dr. Pratibha K, signing off today, Head Department of Biotechnology at KLE SNC. I will be back with some more interesting videos. Stay tuned with me. Thank you all. Stay safe. Stay protected yourself. Jai Hind. Thank you.